So, this morning as we continue through our look at 1 John, we come to chapter 2, verses 3 through 11. And we kind of get, John tells us, how do we know that we know? How do we know that we know God? How can we actually tell if we have a relationship with Him and if we are actually following Him? Because in the opening part of this letter, he's already revealed that we all sin, and we all need forgiveness, and we all need this relationship with God through Jesus. But how do we know that we have that? What is the evidence? And so he tells us what that evidence is in these verses. And this is what he says. This is how we know that we know Him, if we keep His commands. The one who says, I have come to know Him, and yet doesn't keep His commands is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoever keeps His word, truly in him the love of God is made complete. This is how we know we are in Him. The one who says he remains in Him should walk just as He walked. Dear friends, I am not writing you a new command, but an old command that you have had from the beginning. The old command is the word you have heard. Yet I am writing you a new command, which is true in Him and in you, because the darkness is passing away and the true light is already shining. The one who says he is in the light but hates his brother or sister is in the darkness until now. The one who loves his brother or sister remains in the light, and there is no cause for stumbling in him. But the one who hates his brother or sister is in the darkness, walks in the darkness, and doesn't know where he's going, because the darkness has blinded his eyes. So John lays things out, and typically he's a pretty straightforward guy. It may seem like he rambles through his letter, kind of like I ramble through my sermons and such, but he always lays it out there. He's not afraid, and many scholars think he was in his 90s when he wrote this, so he has nothing to be afraid of at this point. It's like if I guess he decided if you don't like what he has to say, who cares? I look forward to the day when I actually feel that way, because I like the honesty. Because once again he comes out with this. If you say I've come to know Him yet don't keep His commands, you're a liar. It's like the second time now he said, if you say this but it's not real in your life, you're just lying. And whether you're lying to other people, maybe you're lying to yourself. Maybe you've deceived yourself. The reality is, it's not true to say you know Him if you're not doing what He says. And so obedience is the evidence. Now, understand that obeying God isn't just something we try to do, though it is obviously something we work at doing. It's something that we want to do. When we have a relationship with God, we want to obey Him. We don't just muster it up and come up with a motivation within ourselves. God motivates us to do it. Paul wrote to the Philippians that it is God who is at work in you both to will and to act according to His good pleasure. So both the willingness to do it and the ability to do it come from God. So if you're doing what's right, and by that he doesn't mean 100% all the time. It means that this is how most people would describe you. Generally speaking, it's like kids. We all have good kids, right? Everybody has good kids, but you know that there are times they're not so good. And there are times they do things that really just anger and upset you, but you don't look at your kid and think about that when you look at your kid, unless you have one of those kids, in which case you got other issues. But most parents, when they look at their kids, are not thinking about how angry they make them at times. Why? Because most of the time they don't. Most of the time, you're not angry. The majority of your time, you like them. The majority of the time, you love them. The majority of the time, you think great things about them. And if anybody says anything bad about your kid, it sets you off. You don't like other people pointing out, because sometimes it's just hard to hear the truth. let's be honest, sometimes somebody will say something. It's like when they complain about Joseph not turning in his homework occasionally, especially at first, it was like, are you kidding me? You're going to knock him out for that? But then found out, yeah, no, he isn't turning in his homework. But sometimes other people seem to focus in on the one or two bad times, and it really ticks us off because it's like, that's not who my kid is. That's what John's talking about here. He's already explained, we all sin, and if you say you don't, you're a liar. So this isn't about doing this perfectly. This is about, in your life, when somebody looks at you, do they see somebody who typically is doing what's right? Are you typically doing what God says? Are you trying to follow Jesus? Because if you say you are, but your life doesn't show it in any way, then there's something not quite right. I don't know, maybe I'm strange here, but I've run across a lot of people that, they tell me they're a Christian, they're a follower of Jesus. I'm glad you told me, because otherwise I would never have known. I would never have guessed it in a million years. I mean, some of these people, it's like, it really surprises me that they claim to follow. It's like, and it shouldn't. It shouldn't surprise someone if you say, hey, I'm a follower of Jesus. And so, obedience, when he's talking about obedience, yes, ideally we will obey all the time. We will do everything right every single time. But since we're not going to, what he's already addressed that, he's already acknowledged that. But now, when people look at our lives, he says, do they see someone who typically is trying to follow what God says? And the beauty of it is, God doesn't change the rules all the time. He's not all up there rewriting the rules every year. When COVID hit, he didn't have to rewrite his rules. It stays the same. And that's why John, he gets down to where he says, dear friends, I'm not writing you a new command, but an old one. And one that you had from the beginning. This is what you've been taught from the very beginning. And this is what we've always said, and this is what we will always say. The old command is the word you've heard. You've already heard this. In other words, John said, I've told you this from the very beginning. And remember, John was the youngest of Jesus' followers. When Jesus was alive, it's believed that John was a young man, probably around 18, 19 years old, maybe, is what I've read a lot. And so he was a pretty young fellow. Now he's 94 years old. He said, in all that time, this hasn't changed. And it's not going to change again. And for me, that's comforting, because I hate when rules change. And I really hate it when rules change and I don't know about it. Somebody doesn't tell me the new rules. And see, I'm glad I got Joe around, because he keeps me updated on all the football changes. Because every year it seems like some rule changes, and it's like, I remember when I was a kid watching some of the football games, and some of what happens now, it's like, is that you can do that? And then they do something, get called, and say, you can't do that? I hate living my life that way. It's like and probably why I get in trouble so much is I don't always know when all the rules change. And laws I get. See, laws I know how to keep up with, because that's, my past as law enforcement officer, yes, I keep up with laws. I know all about that. It's social rules that really, it's like, see, I was talking with my kids about this the other day. You know that last year, if you would have walked into a store wearing a hood and a mask and glasses, man, they'd call the police to come arrest you. Today, you walk into a store not wearing a hood and glasses and a mask, you're going to call the police to arrest you. It's totally opposite. We had to take the car in to get it repaired yesterday. Factory recall on one of the airbags. Apparently it explodes occasionally in some cars. So, oh wow, that'd be exciting. So we decided we didn't want that to happen, and so we took it in. But I had a little anxiety. It's like, I don't even know how to go into a place of business anymore, because half of them you don't even feel welcome. So I don't like that. Well, the nice thing about God, he doesn't change the rules. He wrote it down at the beginning of time, and he hasn't changed it. So when John says this is an old command, he said this hasn't changed from the beginning of time, and it's not going to change. So we at least know that what God says lasts forever. So this is true. So he's not going to call a committee together and change the rules on your life or anything like that. It's always going to stay the same. Now what's interesting is in the very next verse, he says, I'm not writing you a new command, but an old command that you've had from the beginning. The old command is the word you've heard. And then he goes and immediately says, yet I am writing you a new command. Now, what he means by that is, not that this is new, but that he's referring back to in John 13:34, where Jesus, at the last meal that he had with his followers before his crucifixion, he told them, a new command I give you, that you love one another. And even though that wasn't the first time he told them that, he told them that from the beginning. I mean, you read through Jesus' life in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and you find out Jesus talked a lot about loving people. He talked a great deal about loving everyone. But the idea of this being a new command is that, number one, Jesus renewed this, and he reiterated it to his followers. And number two, in the Old Testament, to have a relationship with God, it was based on the commandments of God. And it was based on, this is what you do to have a right relationship with God. And what Jesus did was, he took the commands and he really boiled them down to love God and love others. And now, that's the basis of the commands that we follow. And so it's old. It's in the Old Testament. It's what God told his people from the very beginning. As a matter of fact, it's what all the commandments are about, is loving God and loving others. Jesus just essentially reiterated and re-emphasized the fact that love is what it's about. That's what all of God's commands are about. That's why he tells you to do the things he does. That's why he tells you in Colossians 3:20, children, obey your parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing to the Lord. How do you love God? You love him by obeying your parents. Why? Because it pleases them, and it makes life easier, and it makes life far more pleasant for everybody if you obey. See, growing up, I didn't always obey, and I can tell you, life in my house was not always as pleasant. If I said no to my mom, let me tell you what, it wasn't just mom I had to worry about. Yeah, dad did not like me saying no to mom. If I didn't obey my mother, and if I didn't obey my dad, they lovingly reminded me of how unloving it is to be disobedient. And so life's far better. But it's based on our love for God and our love for our parents. Likewise, it tells parents not to exasperate or over-anger our children. In other words, some parents have this ability to lay burdens on their kids that the kid will never live up to. And it's one of those, good is never good enough, because no matter how good the kid is, the parent always points out how it wasn't good. It wasn't good enough, how they could have done better, things like that. And essentially, the Bible teaches us as parents, don't push them too hard. Don't exasperate them. Don't anger them in this unhealthy way. Because it's not good for them. It's not good for the family. It doesn't please God. Because honestly, it really doesn't do any good if all you do is exasperate. Because then they give up on doing what's right. They give up on trying. And so they grow up to be adults who they don't care anymore. Well, that's not good. That's not what we're after. And so all of the commands, and that's just a couple of them, but all the commands that God gives are based on the commands to love. And that's where John really nails it, is when he's talking about keeping the commandments. And he says, walk the way that Jesus walked. And he says, this is what you've heard from the beginning. So suppose you hadn't read about the life of Jesus. What would he be talking about? You might be confused. So he goes on to say that the one who says he is in light but hates his brother or sister is in the darkness until now. But the one who loves his brother or sister remains in the light, and there is no cause for stumbling in him. So it's love. He boils it down to love. Now, this brothers and sisters that he talks about, it's fellow believers, it's fellow followers of Jesus. It's not just our physical, like blood brothers and sisters, although it certainly, I think that's involved in it as well. So don't misunderstand me in that. Love your siblings, yes. Remember, Jesus says love everybody. But he's focusing on the group. We should be people that if somebody were to walk into our midst, they should recognize that we love each other in this agape, unconditional love that Jesus taught. That's the mark. And that's what keeps us on track. That's what keeps us from stumbling. That's what keeps us from doing the wrong thing, is when we have God's love in us. Because when we have this godly love for each other, when we have this godly love for other people, then we make good decisions. Because we're making decisions based on this love, and so we're going to do what's right. And as a matter of fact, Paul wrote that all of the law and the prophets, which means all the commandments of God, that's one way of saying this, the whole summation of the Old Testament law is summed up in the word, love your neighbor as yourself. So everything that God commands boils down to love. If you can love one another, and if you can love other people, he says, it means you're going to make right decisions, and whether you can remember every command that God ever gave in the Bible or not, if you love people and you make decisions based on that love, it means you're going to make the right decision. At least most of the time. Every once in a while we'll mess up, right? Every once in a while. And sometimes we mess up trying to do the right thing and end up doing something that's not so good. I've done that more times than not. I don't know how many times I've sat down and gone, how'd that go south so fast? So I remember a couple times, it's like, I'm trying desperately not to anger somebody, and the end result is they get angry at me. It's like, my lack of understanding is often the problem there, is I think I know what's going to make somebody mad, and I'm wrong. That happens. But the thing is, we're still motivated by this love for others, so most of the time, we're going to make right decisions. And the times we don't are usually going to be because we lacked information. Or maybe growing up, nobody taught us how to love, how to show love, or how to be a loving person. If you lack that training as a kid, it really makes it difficult as an adult to adjust and figure out how to treat people right and well. But the end result is that John says that's what it boils down to. You want to know that you know God. You want to know that you're walking with Him. It really boils down to obedience to His command to love other people. And as you get closer to Him, as you grow closer to Jesus, you're going to find you love other people more. And not only do you love them more, but you love them better. In other words, you're better at it. You end up showing your love in better ways as you get closer to Jesus. And that's how you know. That's how you know you're on track. Are you growing in your love for others and in your ability to show that love? Because that's really what God wants. And again, in our day and time, it seems like that's the one thing that's lacking in our society right now, is love for other people. I mean, I don't know. I'm a little concerned about our society. And it's because it's so easy to pull people apart and to divide people and to split people. And there's so many different factions on so many different issues right now. I mean, we're coming apart at the seams. But something has to hold us together. Something has to bring us back together. It's, last night I went to put something in my dresser and I pulled the front of the drawer right off. Now this dresser's old. I mean, it's old. I've had it since I was a little kid. And I'm sentimental about things, so I didn't want to just throw it away. It's like, what are you going to do? Well, I got my stuff out, and I got my glue, and I just glued the sucker back on, and Gorilla wood glue is great stuff. Let me tell you what, I clamped it together overnight, put it back in the drawer this morning. Wow, this thing looks better than, should have done this a long time ago. Well, right now, our society needs something like that Gorilla wood glue to hold us together, put us back together, and hold us together. Something that's going to be firm, something we can trust on and rely on, and that trust is found in the love of Jesus. And our society needs that right now, and they're going to get it as they see us demonstrate it. And as we demonstrate it to our society, I believe God's going to be pleased. Because I think that's what he wants. He doesn't like seeing people divided and fighting, hurting each other. He wants to see people coming together. And he wants to see healing come into people's lives. And that's the way it's going to be, is if we learn to love others. So let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we do thank you, Lord, for the love that you show to us. And thank you that you have filled us with your love. And we just pray, Father, that we would indeed learn how to love other people the way that you love them. That we would learn to see them the way you do. That we would learn how to be people who can bring your love, your healing to the people around us. And I pray, Father, that indeed, as we love other people, I pray, Lord, that it would become contagious and others would learn how to love. And that they would see their need for you and your love in their life. And that we would see healing brought to our life. We thank you and we praise you. Just ask that each day we become more and more like you. For it's in Jesus' name I pray.